recognition of same-sex marriage and civil unions, keeping Virginia from recognizing such arrangements formed in other states. To bring attention to this injustice and underscore the need for marriage equality, the Alliance for Progressive Values, Delegate Scott Survell, and various organizations, including People of Faith for Equality in Virginia, Get Equal Virginia, the First Unitarian Church of Richmond, Equality Virginia, as well as gay and lesbian couples, have come together today to discuss the grievous impact this law has on Virginia and its families. So I would now like to introduce Delegate Scott Survell.
Your comments today reminded me that today is the my wife will kill me. Well, let me put it this way. I proposed to my wife on Valentine's Day, 1999. And your comments just made me remember that. And it reminds me of why it's important for us to be here today talking about this. What anniversary is that? 14. Thanks, man. I'm going to call her and wish her a happy anniversary when I meet her.
We won't tell.
Okay. But in any event, it's great to be here today. As you may or may not know, I introduced legislation this year to repeal the Marshall-Newman Amendment from the Virginia Declaration of Rights, which is an historic Virginia document. The reason I did it was a couple reasons. First of all, I think it's something we need to continue fighting for. My colleague David England used to introduce that legislation every year, and I'd always counted on David to do it. And without him being in the legislature, I wanted to make sure it happened again, so I put it in myself. More fundamentally, I believe that marriage is about loving, committed couples wanting to make lifelong promises to each other, take care of each other, be responsible for each other, support each other. And I think denying that opportunity to people, and the opportunity to be able to affirm that by saying you're married just because they're gay is hurtful. And I think if anybody, they're gay, straight, wants to stand up in front of their family and friends and make that commitment to grow old together, it's not for me or the judge or the state to deny them that opportunity, that right. And that's sort of where I come at it from a sort of fundamental sort of human rights point of view. Beyond all that, I think that public opinion has changed a lot on this issue since Virginia adopted the Marshall-Newman Amendment in 2006. The public polling on it has shifted probably roughly about 20 points, not just nationally, but also the Commonwealth of Virginia. When you look at even Virginia polling on this, just last year, when public policy polling looked at the state, they found that 65% of Virginians support some kind of recognition, some kind of legal recognition of same-sex relationships, whether it's civil unions or marriage, but they support some level of recognition. And right now, the Marshall-Newman Amendment, the language in the Constitution of Virginia, prohibits any kind of legal recognition. And I think it's also important to note that taking it out of the Constitution does not legalize gay marriage or anything. It simply gives the legislature the flexibility to deal with the changing circumstances that we're confronted with, not just in Virginia, but nationally. And by continuing to have that language in the Constitution, it creates not only a prohibition, but it creates a lot of uncertainty. When people want to move here, when employers want to locate here, when people want to make fundamental decisions about their lives, when they want to visit people in the hospital, make decisions about probating their assets when they die, and it's language that we don't need to have in the Constitution, much less the Virginia Declaration of Rights, which was supposed to be a document to protect individual freedoms when George Mason wrote it back in 1776. We also have the Supreme Court sort of poised to issue a ruling in May. I think many people are hopeful that the Supreme Court will find that the right to privacy protects people's rights to affirm their love to each other in the form of civil unions or marriage. Having this on Virginia's books, if that were to happen, could create a lot of legal problems within the state, and taking it out of the Constitution would give us the flexibility to deal with that. And also, just even starting this process by passing this legislation this year would have enabled us to at least be in the position to do something about it if the Supreme Court acts in May. Constitutional amendments have to be passed 2 years in a row in identical format. If the Supreme Court were to not act in the way I think some of us hope, we could always not pass the amendment next year and it wouldn't go to the voters. But now, given that this legislation was killed summarily a month ago, the Virginia legislature is not going to be able to remove this from the Constitution until I think 2016, because we can't start the process again until 2 years from now. So, I really feel like Virginia has positioned itself to be increasingly isolated in this regard, and whether you buy into the whole concept or not, I think continuing to have these kinds of laws in the books, aside from being hateful and discriminatory and not respectful, I think, of people's love for each other, it's going to create a lot of uncertainty and legal problems for the state, for businesses in the state, for people in the state. And I wish we had acted, but we didn't. And I think it's important to note that and to continue fighting. So appreciate you all being here today and continuing to have interest in doing something about this. And now I'm going to introduce Senator. Do you mind to introduce Adam?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm happy to take any questions afterwards as well if anybody has any. Thanks.
Thank you.
So I'd like to introduce Senator Evan.
Thank you. Thanks. I'm Senator Adam Evan from Alexandria, and I wanted to make sure that our House colleagues who are here come on up so they can be recognized also for their support for equality and relationships. We have Kay Corey, we've got Betsy Carr, we've got Rob Krupika, and they've all stood up for these issues and for fairness. And our team. Okay. So I chaired and I want to thank Delegate Surville. Since he was engaged today, I think he gets to send those flowers to his wife and get him up to Fairfax in time. But I chaired the Commonwealth Coalition campaign against the Marshall-Newman Amendment when it passed, and with great regret it did pass. And now we have 9 states plus Washington, D.C. that have the freedom to marry for same-sex couples, and we just had 3-1 at the ballot box in last November. And in New Jersey, the legislature has passed this over, a governor has vetoed it, but they're still working on passing it again. We also have other states that explicitly respect out-of-state marriages, and 9 states now offer broad protections short of same-sex marriage. The Pentagon offers new protections to military spouses, yet our Virginia National Guard does not. Virginia was way behind the times regarding interracial marriage, and now we're way behind the times regarding same-sex marriage, even basic relationship status. And I just want to, on a more personal note, I want to mention my grandparents were married for more than 50 years. And I wonder if 2 women in Campbell County want to easily visit in the hospital as a matter of law, is that a threat to marriage? If 2 men in Fairfax County want to make end-of-life decisions and funeral arrangements for each other, is that a threat to marriage? I don't think so. And Mrs. Loving, one of the plaintiffs from Loving versus Virginia, opposed the Marshall-Newman Amendment and supported loving relationships between LGBT people. Obviously, the law that we've got today is antiquated and must eventually change. And I want to thank Delegate Surville for taking a lead on making sure that we continue to work for that. And as a Virginia politician, my colleagues have heard me say this before, but I don't think I'm allowed to be up here without quoting Thomas Jefferson. And Jefferson said, and it's etched in the walls of the memorial in Washington, D.C., "I'm not an advocate for frequent changes in laws and constitutions, but laws and institutions must go hand in hand with the progress of the human mind. As that becomes more developed, more enlightened, as new discoveries are made, new truths are discovered, and manners and opinions change, institutions must also advance to keep pace with the times. And that's what we're talking about here, keeping pace with the times and the enlightenment of the human mind. So with that, I will close and thank you all for being here.
Does anyone else, Delegate Corey, Delegate Keem, anyone else?
I do want to add one thing, if you don't mind. And I just want to add that what Virginia did in this session is consistent with what we have done by barring same-sex couples from adopting children. And we have such a crisis with children who need to be adopted. We have so many pundits, upset about the lowered rate of marriage and stable families. And Virginia is still fighting these very, very well-functioning, socially acceptable formations of the family. And I am looking forward to that changing, and we have a lot of work to do in the next session. Thank you.
I'm just going to add one point that I've said many times. I think the moral arguments and the human arguments have been made really well already. But I do think there's an economic component to this that is going to start having a real impact on Virginia. Some of the largest companies in our country have all come out in favor of marriage equality. And they're doing it because it's important to their employees, it's important to their ability to attract a high-quality workforce, to retain a high-quality workforce, and to be competitive in our global economy. Virginia likes to compete for those companies. And when you have Washington, D.C. and Maryland so easily positioned to take companies from Northern Virginia who have senior executives who demand and require equality, when you have the desire to attract employees who may look for those kinds of benefits, it's going to start having an impact on our ability to be competitive. And the military has already been brought up as an issue, but at what point do we run into a conflict with our strong military presence in this state, because our state's legal structures are not consistent with the current practice in the military? So between the large economic development issues from private corporations as well as from the military, Virginia has a real desperate need to catch up quickly to the rest of the country on this issue, because it's going to start impacting our ability to create jobs, which I'm told is what we all are supposed to be here doing. So thank you all very much.
Thanks, Rob.
Anybody else?
We have Delegate Alfonso Lopez is here as well.
Hi, Delegate Alfonso Lopez.
I just want to say that I'm sorry I was late. I was actually doing something a little bit more local up with the DMV in Senator Portfolio's office. In a few years back, when they passed the Marshall-Newman Amendment in the General Assembly, it was signed by, or was passed by the General Assembly, I was on the statewide coalition fighting that. And we dedicated 7 months of our lives trying to convince people not to go down that road. When you hear folks in the General Assembly saying that, there's no LGBT discrimination in the Commonwealth, when you hear folks in different parts of the state ignore this basic civil rights issue, we still have work to do. And I'm very proud of the fact that in my district, 108 languages were spoken. 108 languages were spoken in my district, and 58 languages were spoken in my local high school. But it's not just ethnic and racial and nationality diversity that makes us sort of the rich tapestry of Virginia. It's every kind of diversity, and we need to embrace all of them. And denying or ignoring any one aspect of that makes us less so in some way. So I view this as one of the major civil rights issues of our generation. And I'll be standing solidly behind moving Virginia forward in this area. So thank you very much for being here.
They say that if you give a politician a chance to speak. I'll be very brief. My name is Delegate Mark Keem. I'm from Fairfax County, Northern Virginia. And couple of hours ago, I was at another press conference where I was wearing this sticker because it says Virginia is for lovers. And we're promoting history in Virginia. It's part of the Road to Revolution, which, of course, 230 years ago this year, 1783 was when we had the Treaty of Paris that allowed the United States as we know it today to be formed. So the big struggles in the 18th century were about tyranny versus freedom. It's about the government's oppression versus our lives as individuals created by God to make sure that we have that freedom that we have. So the struggles in the 18th century were big. It was about freedom versus slavery. Struggles in the 19th century were about the race of our people. How do you treat people differently based on the race? Struggles in the 20th century were about the gender. How do you treat women and men in the same way? I think the struggles of the 21st century that we're in deals with two categories of people that have been in the shadows. People like me, immigrants, who come from different parts of the world here in different status of documentation, and those that have different sexual orientation. So in every example, from the 18th century to today, 230 years of our history, we have won those struggles. Took a lot of sacrifice, took a lot of time and effort. A lot of men and women have stood, lost their lives for the cause. But because of every single person who stood up against intolerance, against history's bigotry, we've now come to a point where we are more perfect than we've ever been before. But we will never be perfect unless every single human being in this world is treated the same way, regardless of where they're from, what they believe, what they look like, and where they're going in their lives. And so until that day happens in Virginia, we cannot say that Virginia is part of that perfect union. And so I join all of my colleagues in fighting every single day to make sure that equality and non-discrimination is the law of our land, the law of our Commonwealth.
Thank you.
All right, I would like to introduce John Sterling.
Thank you. I brought a few visual aids too. My name is John Sternlicht. I worked also very hard in 2006, and Rob, I think, left, but I made a lot of the same speeches as Rob did because my career has been in economic development. This amendment did not keep me from getting married 2 years ago, but it did make me have to leave the Commonwealth of Virginia and go to Washington, D.C. in order to do it. We were married, James and I together have 3 sons. Visual aid number 1. We were married at Georgetown University, and then we came back and were married here at Beth Ahava, down the street on Franklin Street, which is one of the oldest synagogues in the country. I think the 6th oldest congregation in the country. The rabbi who married us did so on pain of arrest, because in Virginia it's illegal to pronounce a marriage when it's not legally permitted. So we came back, we had a lovely wedding with 350 of our closest friends in a very traditional Jewish ceremony. So there were some members of the General Assembly who were there as well. The blemish of Loving versus Virginia was erased only by the United States Supreme Court. And I'm afraid that this may be what has to happen with Virginia. We've all lived happily ever after, but in Virginia it's not necessarily true. There are a few simple truths, though, that I want to bring up. Oh, another visual aid. This is my stepson and his wife. As you may be able to see, this marriage would have been illegal in Virginia also. Few simple truths. Marriage is not necessarily a religious right. I think we all know that you can go down to the courthouse and get married without benefit of clergy. In Europe, it's a completely separate right. So civil ceremonies are just as valid under the law as religious ceremonies, because marriage is a contract between 2 adults governing relationships and property rights as sanctioned by the state. So what you're doing by outlawing marriage equality in Virginia is not only limiting my property rights as compared to the ones I had when I was married to a woman, but you're also infringing the free practice of my religion, because my religion, my faith, believes in marriage equality, as do a number of others. It's also nonsensical to say that marriage equality infringes on the religious freedom of others, because I can't walk into a Catholic church and demand that they marry me to a woman. So it's nonsensical to say that marriage equality has any impact on any religious group because they already have their own rules about whom they marry and whom they don't. All marriage equality does is to limit the right of the state and some religious groups to discriminate. And my personal belief is that God is not all about discrimination. Marriage is also not necessarily about procreation. Many people marry with no intention to procreate or no ability to procreate, especially in second, third, fourth, fifth, or sixth marriages. My father remarried in his 50s after my mother died. Obviously no intention of having more children. My stepmother said, if we do, you can put it in the Smithsonian. My ex-wife also remarried in her 40s, also with no intention, and she doesn't understand why my marriage to James is any different from her marriage to Peter. Nor do I. The amendment does not prevent people from being gay. The amendment does not prevent gay people from getting married, as you can see. They just have to do it somewhere else. So what these laws do is they limit our economic rights and make our marriages financially and legally unequal in every way. Taxes, inheritance, insurance, pensions, hospital visitation, joint property, spousal immunity, and 1,000 other rights, literally. If you were sincere, Virginia, about protecting the sanctity of marriage, then you should outlaw divorce and criminalize adultery. Clearly, the fact that I got married 2 years ago hasn't affected your marriage one single bit, and to claim it does insults everybody's intelligence. This, in fact, is the pit into which most anti-equality hypocrites fall. My husband, and I do say husband because, and I had to actually explain this to someone, and I never begrudge an explanation. When you're married to someone and that person is a man, that person is your husband. When you're married to someone and that person is a woman, that person is your wife. It doesn't really matter who you are, but that's just how that works mechanically, in case anybody was ever curious. My husband is James Finley, the former VCU volleyball coach who was fired by the new athletic director there because he was gay. He was very quickly hired as the new head volleyball coach at Seattle University, a lovely Jesuit school, and he's already been working there for a few weeks. So once our youngest graduates from high school this year and goes off to college, I will be moving to Seattle too. The university and indeed the entire state are very welcoming. As Adam alluded, there's marriage equality there now. And the best and the brightest in our society in economic development terms, whether they're gay or straight, often choose to live in a diverse, open, welcoming, vibrant society. And Virginia just keeps proving herself backwards and hateful by enacting these prejudices into law. It's time to correct this mistake before yet again the United States Supreme Court forces us to do so, and avoid yet again the shame that Virginia has brought upon herself in previous days. And the court surely will do this. It's just a matter of time. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
All right, now I would like to introduce Reverend Robin Gorsline, President of People of Faith for Equality in Virginia.
I brought my own visual as well. My wonderful husband. I thank John and others who have spoken. This was all a great occasion. This is Jonathan Leibold, Dr. Jonathan Leibold, my husband of 15 years, and I agree with you, John. He's my husband, then from the beginning. I'm pastor of Metropolitan Community Church of Richmond, and I'm also president of People of Faith for Equality in Virginia. And Jonathan is a licensed clinical social worker in this state who is in private practice in Richmond. We are the proud parents of 3 daughters and an almost 2-year-old granddaughter. And this is our 9th year of going to the Richmond City Circuit Court clerk's office on Valentine's Day, filing a request yet again for marriage license. And we're thrilled that the witness we began in 2005 in Richmond has now spread to 4 other communities this year. And I have word already this morning that over 60 people gathered in Arlington at 10 a.m. at the Arlington Courthouse to do as they're going to do a little while later at the Richmond Courthouse. And next year, I think we'll have 10 witnesses rather than 5. Thanks to James Parrish and Kevin Clay from EV, we're expanding this all over the place. Why do we continue to do this? Let me be clear. We're not asking for the right to marry. We're already married. It's happening all the time. As John said, you can't stop people from getting married. We know we're married. Our friends and family know we're married. The church that I serve knows we're married. The synagogue of which Jonathan is a leader knows we're married. So the other couples also who will be there today know that we're married. Instead, we're telling local and state authorities that we want them to catch up and fix their laws. Actually, they're our laws, and they're not working for us. You see, this witness harks back, and several have said this in various ways already, to other times when people confronted their public officials to insist that repressive laws be changed, such as when African Americans went to courthouses to register to vote. We continue a long and honorable tradition of talking back to authority. However, unlike those ugly days in the past, in some cases at least, we are met now with joy and acceptance when we go over across the street over here to the Richmond City Circuit Court. Bevel Dean, who is the clerk of the court, will greet us. I talked to him this morning already. He said, "I'm so glad you're coming back." He keeps a record on file of every application that's filed, every license from another jurisdiction that is left there. He keeps that on file as a historical record because he knows, just as in the case of voting and Jim Crow and all this and massive resistance, that the day is going to come, and it's going to come pretty soon. But his hands are tied, of course, by the law that people have already talked about. So this is why I'm glad to be here with delegates Surville and others who are ready to pass this legislation to overturn Marshall Newman, what I call the anti-marriage amendment. Now, Jonathan and I have chosen not to go elsewhere to obtain a license. We have claimed Virginia as our home, although neither one of us were born here. But we have made it our home. We believe we're going to spend the rest of our lives here. And we want our marriage recognized by the civil authority of the state to which we have pledged our loyalty and our commitment. And make no mistake, it will be done. Oh, it's going to happen. And I'm not even sure about the court. I'm not holding out a lot of hope for the current court. They'll do some good things, I believe, in May or June. But I'm not sure they're going to go all the way. But I know it's going to happen anyway, because love always wins. We're going to hear a little while later from my friend Gene Pupke, who's the senior minister at First Unitarian. They have this wonderful slogan for Unitarian Universalists, standing on the side of love. Well, the first person who's standing on the side of love is God. And the rest of us join God there. Love always wins. Fearful people who are victims of narrow interpretations of God's redemptive work in the world, people who impose their crimped and stingy view of what love is, they sometimes win in the short run. But good people are often led to insist on old ways because they don't know the new ones. But we're here today in this press conference and next across the road to be back and to be back every year to help this change that's already happening. Adam and others have already talked about how it's already happening. So there's no doubt in my mind about the eventual outcome. None whatsoever. Our cause will triumph. And the leaders, by the way, of the other side know this. They already know it. If you can get them to have a glass of wine in the corner somewhere and talk to you for a little while, they'll begin to admit that they know the tide of history is working against them. The sad part, so we're not talking about the outcome, we're talking about the timetable. We're talking about the timetable. But unfortunately, that's important too, because delay has consequences. We've heard some of that already from the delegate who talked about adoption. We have families every day. As a clergy person, I spend time in the hospital with people who don't have the things all settled in their legal paperwork, so that they can't make decisions for each other. It's a sad situation that happens too often. Families are denied two parents legally, so schools can be difficult at times, depending on situations. And every day, sadly, there are young people who are contemplating and sometimes actually carrying out the sense of their hopelessness, and they jump to their death, or they do something else to do harm to themselves because they hear the negative messages that are contained within this amendment, this law. So that's why we're here, and we're going to be here every year until we get it done. And I want to say one thing about this. I'm quite convinced that although we've been doing it for 9 years, Jonathan and I, and Gene and others have been with us almost that long, that it's not going to be another 9 years. And it's not just because the court's going to do it, it's because the people of Virginia are going to change the Constitution of this state. It's going to happen, and it's going to happen sooner than many of us think. And so, hope keeps us going, and we know that the outcome is certain. Thank you all.
Okay, well, thank you, Reverend Gorsline. And now I would like to introduce Mr. James Parrish, who's the Executive Director of Equality Virginia.
Good morning, and we first wanted to go on record in thanking Delegate Surville for introducing the amendment, the language to repeal the amendment this year. As the defeat of SB 701 showed us Tuesday evening, here in Virginia we are still fighting for the basic rights of workplace protections, let alone full relationship recognition. And with the current makeup of our House of Delegates, the wonderful people here not counting, Equality Virginia sees a lot of hurdles to the removal of the Marshall-Newman Amendment. But that doesn't mean we're going to stop fighting for what is right for gay and lesbian couples in this state. And while change is more likely to come from the federal government, we will continue to push our state legislators for fairness and challenge them to move forward and take the necessary action so that every loving couple and every family has the equal protections and opportunities that come with marriage. And on this Valentine's Day, AV would like to wish John and James and Robin and Jonathan and every loving couple in this state a happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you, Mr. Parrish. All right, I would now like to introduce Judd Proctor.
If you've never seen a same-sex marriage license, I'll pass this around. We got this in 2006 in Massachusetts when we thought we wouldn't be able to. I'll also pass around some information about the rights certain rights that are denied LGBT people in marriage, and I'll also give you a survey that they did in Massachusetts that they found after 5 years of marriage there that the marriage rate dropped, and it dropped because they're seeing that the marriages in Massachusetts are lasting longer than the heterosexual marriages in Massachusetts. So I'm going to pass some of these around as well. Take one.
You meant the divorce rate.
The divorce rate. Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. My name is Judd Proctor, and I've lived in Virginia all my life. I was born in 1950 on Virginia Avenue, right off of Route 1 across from Aunt Sarah's. I went to public school, college here, VCU, University of Richmond, and worked as a public school teacher for 37 years in Henrico County schools. I'm now retired from public school teaching. Today, I'm an LGBT historian. I research and write about gay history. Together with my partner, we produce a radio show called The Rainbow Minute, which celebrates the history and contributions of the LGBT community. With the help of over 200 volunteer readers, writers, editors, and contributors, it's heard in Richmond and over 200 radio stations around the world. We give it away free. There's no syndication fee. I'm sorry that my husband, Brian Burns, could not be here today. You might have heard of Brian. He wrote the Lewis Skinner biography just recently. He is unable to retire with me and has to work to obtain his health insurance from his job. He's a horticultural specialist. We were legally married in Massachusetts on St. Patrick's Day, 2006. But our marriage doesn't count for anything in Virginia. This is why he can't get health insurance from my health insurance plan, and he has to continue to work. We met about 20 years ago at gay volleyball near Bird Park. We had a commitment ceremony 2 years later, followed by our small marriage ceremony, just Brian and I and the Justice of the Peace in Provincetown, Massachusetts. We were told there's a possibility that we wouldn't be able to get married in Massachusetts that early, because at the time Mitt Romney was trying to dredge up a law that prevented black people from wearing white people and use it against us because Virginia had the amendment. But when we got there, we found out that the Provincetown clerk of court would marry us, and we said, yes, we do want to leave Virginia and move there. So we married. We are now considering self-exile from Virginia and going to a place where our family has equal protections. We have secured a real estate agent to help us find a home in Maryland. I don't like living in Virginia anymore. I don't like paying Virginia taxes to a state that puts burdens on families and other burdens on my family and other same-sex families and their children. I'm not proud to be a Virginian. This June will be a watershed moment for LGBT people here. That's when the Supreme Court is expected to make a decision that will affect LGBT people. And at this point, most legal experts expect the Defense of Marriage Act, or DOMA, will be declared unconstitutional. That would allow federal benefits for gays that live in states that allow same-sex marriage. The outcome of the other Supreme Court case, Proposition 8, is not as clear. Most think the court will rule narrowly and will deem Proposition 8 unconstitutional. That would add California to the list of states that allow same-sex marriage, but wouldn't affect the laws of other states. In that case, my husband and I would not qualify for each other's Social Security upon our deaths. We would be subjected to federal estate tax upon our deaths because our marriage still would not count in Virginia. We would leave the state to protect our family and become part of the third great exodus of gays from Virginia. You may ask, what was the first and second great exodus? The first occurred after March 1993. That's when Sharon Bottoms of Henrico County lost custody of her son, Tyler, just because she was a lesbian. That happened to other lesbians at the time too, but her case garnered much media coverage. Many lesbians and lesbian couples left Virginia during that time to protect their families. The second exodus from Virginia came after the Virginia Marriage Amendment, which was voted into law in November 2006. We know at least 6 couples that left right after that. 2 left the country. And they're still leaving. There's also an indication that our LGBT youth are leaving or will be leaving Virginia. The June 2012 HRC National Youth Study, the largest of its kind, found that LGBT youth continue to be verbally harassed and bullied. But one other finding came from that. 83% of LGBT youth believe they will be happy eventually. But over half said they expect they have to move away from their communities to find happiness. Brian and I consider ourselves married, no matter what Virginia says.
Amen.
All right, I would now like to introduce Reverend Jean Pupke of the First Unitarian Church of Richmond. Hi.
I was thinking as I was sitting here, as John listed my points and then Robin listed my points. What do we have to share at this point on the rising precipice that we're coming to? We will have, because of court cases, because of precedent in the law, because these polling numbers reveal a truth, we're going to have a move toward justice. And I guess I want to say something for my state that I'm a resident of, and I'm an 11th generation Virginian. Yeah, I'm an 11th, have the whole, you don't want to know my relatives. This is a time for us to look who's on our left and our right as we approach these days. This is a time for us, if indeed we start to see the smallest successes here and elsewhere in our movement, to look and see who is in the position we have been in. This is the time to make sure we don't seek to to move toward an end that omits the inclusion of our brothers and sisters who are here as immigrants, denied the rights of citizenship. This is a time to notice the rights of women who are still underpaid in our Commonwealth. Now, I don't want to sound like one of those kitchen sink liberals who goes to the rally for one thing and speaks in advocacy for the other, because we all know, we all agree on those things, because I don't believe that's true. I simply want to say this thing. My spouse, my wife, who's a retired lieutenant colonel from the Army, and I have to go through the gate at the base, and she has to explain that I am her guest, not her wife. Now maybe this is going to change. We're going to go down and see what's going to happen after August 31st, how we can make ourselves known officially. But one thing I know is that if I just concern myself with getting mine, then Virginia doesn't move toward justice. Virginia moves again towards preference and partiality and division and partitioning people from the truth, which is the equality of all human beings before the law. So I want to remind us not to begin to think that we are coming close, or even that moving will in fact help us all, because we all can't move to one place. There remains here justice work to be done. Whether you do it in the name of God, whether you do it in the name of true justice, whether you serve an idea that is humanity's need for equality, it doesn't matter. Let us think carefully now as we get to this moment, and not be the slightest bit triumphant, for until all receive justice, none are free.
Amen. Amen.
All right, I would now like to introduce Ellen Shelton.
My daughter is a lesbian, and when I first found out, I worried about, what our family life and all would be. And it turns out we have a fantastic family life. When she got married, we had a large wedding, and then we went out to this beautiful house out in the country and had a fantastic reception with everybody dancing and doing all that. And they of course have disadvantages, and I'm not really going to go into them because they've been gone into here. The financial and the doubt that's created about relationships when important, like in the hospital or at time of death. They have 3 beautiful children, and those children are the delight of my husband and my wife. They work, not the grandchildren, but my daughter and her wife work as a project manager and a licensed clinical social worker. So they have good jobs. And the children, like I told you, they're fantastic. They're also super kids. The oldest is 16, and she's in a leadership and international studies program in school. She's a class officer. She's in the show choir, and I saw the thing last night. and it was fantastic. She's a rock climber, a guitar player, and a performer, and a youth staff member for activities at a national church conference, and a high grade average. The other two are coming along. They're competitive swimmers. One plays dance. The other one is a competitive gymnast. They attend schools for the gifted, and they have a high grade average. So my point is that they do very well, and I want you to see that as a family, we have a lot of fun.
Nice.
And so that's it.
Thank you so much.
And I have these for, if you want it, and you can go ahead and bring on the next person.
Okay, well, thank you, Ms. Shelton. All right, I'd like to introduce Barbara and Chet Woolrod.
I call her my bride. We've been married 38 years. It's a privilege to be here today. I think y'all have said everything that needs to really be said. I guess we could be speaking for old parents who have children, and we love those children very much. I'm going to temper my comments today because I can get very angry at what goes on here about our daughter. But we truly believe in open dialogue, talking, listening, sharing. I didn't see that on House HJ 665. I hope someday we will be able to sit down and talk to people. We all will. We live in Chesterfield County. Our kids went to Chesterfield County schools. We attend the Baptist church. It can be difficult, but we feel that's where we need to be to share our story. Our son, he's sweet and wonderful. He married his wife Tricia in Ohio. They moved to Virginia to live in the home that they purchased with all the rights and benefits of a married couple. Our sweet and wonderful daughter married her wife Jess in Washington, D.C. They moved to Virginia in the home they bought with no rights, no benefits, no anything. We were at a family dinner last week. It was Barbara's birthday. I want you to know that there were Democrats, Republicans, Independents, a very mixed group at the table. We're a diverse group. At the end of the dinner, Katie said, "Is there anybody in the room that can tell us about a good accountant? We have no rights, we own property together, we want to get the most benefit we can." Our son matched her up with his accountant and called the fellow and said, "I want you to do all you can for her." The next week my sister came. She comes a lot, but she came in, she was sad, and she sat down on the sofa and she said, "I'm hurt." And I thought, here it comes, she's going to tell me she's leaving her husband. And she said, "I'm hurt." And I said, "What about it?" She said, "What Katie said the other day, that Katie and Jess have no rights." And her comment to me was, "It's time this stopped." So today what I'm telling these people is, it's time this stopped. I wrote this down because it's beautiful. It says that all people are created equal, all of us, for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's all I want for my family. I want my son to be able to pursue happiness. I want my daughter to be able to pursue happiness. And right now, she can't to the fullest because of what goes on. I have to do my sarcastic part because I could have made this whole thing sarcastic when I'm in this building. I haven't had good experiences in this building talking with people. It was refreshing to have these people here. It helped my heart to see them and to hear them. Not y'all. Y'all are always refreshing and wonderful. But the delegates that stood up here, it did my heart good to see them. So what I was thinking is this week, I love music. I listen to it all the time. This is love song week. So I thought, just suppose somebody here decided it's not for everybody to listen to love songs. let's make some HB, HJ amendment, rule, attachment or something that says we're gonna tell people who can listen to love songs, when, where, and how. You know, we all know love songs are for everybody. Love is for everybody, and so is marriage. So thank you for letting us speak.
Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Woolrod. In conclusion, I'd like to introduce our final speaker, Mr. Roland Winston, who is Deputy Director at the Alliance for Progressive Values, and he oversees the Diversity and Equality Task Force.
Thank you, Victoria. When I thought about doing this press conference and proposed it to Victoria, I had an idea of who I would try to get in touch with, not as who is in specific, but the idea of the lineup. And I found it much more difficult than I expected to find couples that could come. So the second thing I did was go to parents. And so I really appreciate parents coming and sharing with us today. I also sort of wanted to cover across the spectrum of some of the special circumstances that people face. And I wanted to have someone other than me, so I'm not going to include it other than mentioning it, to speak about binational couples where one of the partners is undocumented. So we know it's an issue. It's one of the things that Get Equal works on, which I'm also affiliated with. So I'm not going to go into that, but I will get Victoria to flip over the large photograph there, and I'm going to read a little story that I got. This is a photograph of Chris on the right and Crystal on the left. SFC Chris Ruiz de Velasco enlisted in the Army in 2003. She's a native of Texas and has been stationed in Alabama, Texas, and Virginia, and has also been deployed to Afghanistan and Iraq. In 2010, she and Crystal from Alabama met while Chris was stationed at Redstone Arsenal in Alabama, and they were married in 2011. In 2011, Chris was PSC'd. I'm sorry, I don't know what these mean. PCS.
From his change of station.
I should read this, but I didn't know your wife was military. To Fort Lee. Crystal gave up her job at a leading biotechnical research institute so the family, including their boxer Jack, could move to Virginia together. Keeping a low profile continued to be crucial until the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Though repeal is a relief, it's a mixed blessing as long as Chris is posted in Virginia, because their marriage is not legal here. The ability to gain employment has been extremely tough given the economic conditions. Crystal's opportunity to use military spouse preference is blocked due to DOMA. This is a program used by other military spouses to lessen the career burden that the employment interruption of spouses results in that relocate with their military members. The financial burden of not being gainfully employed since the relocation could have been avoided. The opportunity to use the MSP would have alleviated this burden. The financial burden extends to the denied assistance from the military for BAH and BAS for living expenses for all military families. The burden extends to the denial of access to use on base facilities, which now will be possible. But an ID card is far from providing the most basic benefits to all military families. Health and medical coverage for Crystal through the military is also barred due to DOMA. Outside of the military, Virginia laws also deny us the most basic benefits as a married couple. Our home states also deny us these same benefits. Whether it be the ability to include both our names on the birth certificate of our child or to simply file joint returns, my family is denied those simple benefits. Just because my definition of a family is different, my family is denied even the basic benefits. They've both been registered to vote here and are as much citizens of Virginia as a young military family can be. Given the assault House Republicans made against Judge Thorne Beglin, we made the decision not to ask SFC Ruiz de Velasco to appear today, and Crystal was unable to take time off from work. I prepared some information that's basically statistical, so I'm going to provide it to media that wants it rather than actually going through it all. The consensus of researchers around marriage equality say that it's very profitable for states, so it's an economic issue. This estimate was that it would produce over $100 million in Virginia over 3 years' time. Give me a second to try to cut this down. Since marriage is legal right across the border in Washington and Maryland, they're certainly benefiting from the fact that marriage is not legal here economically. 20% of same-sex couples now live in states where they can marry. Overall, 16% of the U.S. population lives in states where same-sex couples can marry. By the end of the day, it's expected that Illinois will have approved marriage, bringing the total to 20% of the overall population living where same-sex marriage is legal. Estimated that 53% of Americans now favor equality and 49% of Virginians now favor marriage equality. And that's not like 51 people, 51% disapprove. It's about 40, and then there's the undecideds. 83% of Fortune 100 companies provide domestic partner benefits in 2011. That's up from 64% in 2004. Who are the companies that do this? Insurance companies like Aetna, AIG, Chubb, the Hartford. Consumer product companies like Apple, Nike and Gap, Anheuser-Busch, Best Buy. Here's an example of what people were talking about earlier. It's not actual, it's a constructed example. Ellen and Sue live in Virginia, which doesn't permit same-sex marriage. Ellen works in Washington, D.C. and is covered by a group health insurance policy in D.C., which must cover same and opposite sex partners. Ellen and Sue marry in D.C. even though they live in Virginia. Ellen may add Sue to her health coverage because they're lawfully married and covered by D.C. policy. However, should Sue be hospitalized, it's recommended that the couple have advance written directives as a precaution. Due to the complications of Ellen and Sue's marriage not being recognized in Virginia, the couple would be better off living in another state. Some of you may be familiar with Freedom to Marry as an organization. It's a national organization. And at the Winter Mayor's Convention last winter, they started a project called Mayors for Marriage. And so far, mayors in 32 states, close to 300, have signed on. It started with the mayor of LA, the mayor of Boston, and the mayor of New York, and Anise Parker, the out-lesbian mayor of Houston, Texas. And in Virginia, the mayor of Alexandria, the mayor of Charlottesville, the mayor of Hampton, and the mayor of Capron, Virginia, population 179, I believe it is, have signed on. And I am happy to announce today that last Monday, Mayor Pritchett of Ashland signed on, and yesterday, Mayor Moore of Petersburg. So
where's the Richmond mayor?
Well, if you go to the Freedom to Marry page and click on the mayor's page, you'll find a petition to get Dwight Jones to sign on. We really appreciate everyone's participation. We think that we've got to continue to do this. From the people that have spoken today and the message you've got, we've got a huge core here to continue the fight and move forward. And if you are a Nate Silver fan, in 2009 he did a projection on when marriage would come to all the states. And I didn't check on the ones that have already got it on when they actually fell, but I believe we are on that projection in 2009 for 2016. So if we really push, as Delegate Serval said, that's when the next opportunity is. Oh, I forgot I had one more picture there, but I don't have the whole story there. You may be familiar with Brigadier General Smith and her wife Tracy, and they are also Virginia residents, but I don't have the details of their story as far as benefits, but they do live in Virginia. And any questions for anyone other than me? Thank you.
Thank you very much.